What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We got an interesting video today that's going to be covering two interesting weapon perks that are usually overlooked in Modern Warfare. I'm of course talking about Frangible Disabling and Frangible Wounding. All guns in Modern Warfare have these perks, except the Model 680 for some reason, which I'm not joking, only has one of them, and literally every other gun in this game has both. Anyway, these two perks are quirky to say the least. Both do different things, of course, so with this guide, I'm going to be going over both of them. And one of them, more specifically, Frangible Disabling, may surprise you and it may even make some of you guys want to run it just for fun. The results from my testing were actually pretty surprising with the Disabling perk and it piqued my interest, so I hope this video can do the same for you. It actually got a little bit of a buff sometime in the past few months. I just honestly couldn't tell you when exactly, but is it worth running any of these two perks? Well, let's go ahead and dive right into the first one, which is Frangible Wounding, and we'll save the more interesting one for last, and we can talk about the implications for them in multiplayer and in Warzone. Frangible Wounding in the game description states that it briefly causes targets' healing to be delayed. Pretty simple, so whenever you have this perk equipped on a gun, the enemy is not going to be able to auto-regenerate their health as fast as usual. But how fast? Well, the normal health regen time sits at about 5.54 seconds, which honestly feels like an eternity in Call of Duty time. When you have this perk on, enemies' health will take up to 10.28 seconds to heal completely. That is an 86% increase in the time it takes to heal, which, as you can tell from this little video clip, it probably feels like it's just dragging on and on and on. 5 seconds is already a long time in Call of Duty time, but 10 seconds? Nah, I'm good. Thankfully, that's about all this perk does. There didn't seem to be any hidden mechanics behind it or anything like that really made it incredibly strong or annoying for multiplayer. It doesn't affect flinch or anything like that, and health regen is really the only thing affected. But how do stim shots work? Well, just as you would probably expect, stim shots are a counter to this weapon perk, and health regeneration basically functions like normal with stim shots. Quick Fix can also work to counter this perk, but those are really the only two counters I can think of. So is this perk any good? Well, I would say it depends on what you're playing. In multiplayer, it has some fantastic potential, especially in one-life game modes. Having to wait 10 seconds to be completely healed in multiplayer really slows you down, so if someone is using it against you, Stim Shot is basically a must. Since Stim Shot is basically part of the meta though, I have a feeling many of you probably wouldn't have a problem with encountering this perk anyways. But that 10 seconds delay is pretty scary, and so it's something I think is worth experimenting with. Imagine if you're in a gunfight and you know the enemy is really weak. Well, now you have a window of time almost twice as large to go and take them out before they recover. That 10 seconds is absolutely painful to sit through, so yeah, this perk has some serious potential. In Warzone, Frangible Wounding can have some good potential, especially if you play with a team. Now, armor in Warzone does make this perk less effective. The only way it'll work is if the enemy has no armor plates equipped and they're taking direct damage to their health. Once the armor is broken, then Frangible Wounding will take effect. Having to wait 10 seconds to be fully healed is pretty awful in Warzone, but since you can equip armor plates as long as you have them, I feel that it's less effective than in normal multiplayer. If the enemy already has no armor, then they're pretty much dead in Warzone regardless because of how squishy players can be with no armor. It can still be effective assuming you have an enemy who has no armor, but most of my engagements, they tend to go put some back on whenever they're in cover anyway. It may not be quite as strong as in multiplayer, but it's still unique and effective in specific scenarios, and it adds a nice change to your gameplay. Now for the fun one, Frangible Disabling. The in-game description for this one states that bullets will slow enemy movement and will disable tactical sprint briefly when you hit the enemy's legs. So there's a few things to unpack with this one. First off, the area you have to hit is basically middle of the thighs and down to get the effect, and it only applies to this part of the leg. This generally puts you at a disadvantage because, well, you're shooting legs which often deal way less damage than torso or chest shots, so it's not a good habit to get into. But we still have some neat effects that come with this perk. The first most obvious thing is that you get a crazy stun-like effect with your aim. Now, Exclusive Ace actually did a video on the best weapon perks, and when he used it, the effect was inconsistent, and it happened basically at random. With my testing, I can tell you it's been buffed since his video, because it happens basically every time you hit someone in the legs, but the effect doesn't stack. What that means is when you hit someone, you get the stun effect, and then even if you keep shooting, the effect won't happen again until the effects from the first shot completely wear off. This consistency buff has made this actually kind of a decent and unique perk in some scenarios. You get the vision blur, which causes your screen to bounce a bit more, and the enemy's red name, as well as your crosshairs, will disappear. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like it actually affects flinch itself, rather you just see the screen jump and bobble a little bit more from the stun effect. But your reticle is largely in the same spot, and if there was some sort of flinch increase when using this, it's really not much at all. When it comes to the movement speed part of it, it does disable your ability to go into super sprint. In this example, I have no issues going immediately to super sprint, but with this perk, I have about a 1 second delay to get into it. If you get shot in the legs while sprinting, you'll notice you kind of stagger and slow down briefly, but again, the effect doesn't seem to stack, and it has to reset before more shots can enable the stun effect. It's definitely really noticeable when you get shot by it, and it makes running to cover a bit of a pain in the butt for sure. As far as any counters, there didn't seem to be any consistent counters to this effect. Battle Hardened was useless, and the weapon perk available to snipers and marksman rifles called Focus seemed to work at one point, and then the next game, almost as if bugged, it stopped working completely, and then from then on out it didn't work at all, so I can't really recommend Focus as a perk to counter it either. It seems like we just have to deal with the effects of the perk. If you were able to find any counters or tricks to counter it, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to pin it for everyone to see. And that's basically all that Frangible Disabling does and is capable of doing to my knowledge. So what are the implications for this in multiplayer? Well, since the perk now seems to function pretty consistently and well, it has more use than it did before. First off, consider using it on the Origin 12 or some sort of shotgun or an SMG. With the Origin specifically, you can spray the body as a whole and land some pellets on the legs, which do enable the stun effect, as you can see in this example. This is a combination that is guaranteed to be rage-inducing and will probably really annoy many players who encounter it. It's similar to the strobe light in Black Ops 4, but obviously not nearly as strong in any way, shape, or form. It's mainly just annoying. The ability to slow enemies down is also pretty cool, but since this is only from shooting the legs, you're basically better off just shooting the chest and torso and actually getting the kill, especially in Modern Warfare with its time to kill that is so much quicker. One other good example I can think of is for drop shotting. If you're a drop shotter, give this perk a try because it may be of some use to you. As a whole though, for multiplayer, I don't think it's as good as it may sound just because you die so quick anyway, so leg shots aren't really recommended. It is neat though, but it isn't super practical and you're probably better off with something else with that class point. For Warzone, well, sadly, just like with Frangible Wounding, it will not work unless the enemy has no armor plates equipped. I was able to get myself into a match with my girlfriend's account in the same game and went ahead and tested it out. Unfortunately, with the enemy having to have no armor, it just makes this perk a bit underwhelming. If they have no armor, why even bother shooting at their legs? It only takes a few shots with any gun usually, given the range of course to kill them, but the idea of trying to aim low is kind of a bad idea. Maybe if you have a team and the enemy is at a good distance, then it may have some value to it as a perk in Warzone, but by itself in most cases, you'll probably want to be running something to help lower recoil or increase range or something like that instead, or in my case use FMJ since I use an LMG quite a bit in Warzone and it's good for shooting through cover. It's a shame because this perk has some really cool potential in Warzone, but it just isn't practical enough with the armor issue, and I can kind of get why because I feel that with it working all the time and consistently as it does now, it would probably be a bit of a game changer for team-based game modes like trios or quads. So for Warzone, I don't really recommend using this weapon perk. Its usefulness is just too dependent on too specific of a situation in my opinion. And that just about covers everything I wanted to share with you guys about these two perks. Wounding is cool and is actually pretty useful to use, but Disabling has some pretty neat features that are often overlooked, and while you don't want to always be aiming at their legs, you can use this perk to your advantage for some neat and unique gameplay elements that can spice up playing and potentially get you some hate mail. Unfortunately though, Frangible Disabling doesn't have much practical use, especially in Warzone. What do you guys think of these perks? Have you had some success with either of them? Let me know and be sure to subscribe if you're new here for some gun guides and shotgun focused content and just COD content in general. And with all that being said and out of the way, I want to wish you all a happy day/night and I'll see you in the next video.